In this story, it has one of my favorite part of arguments when you're sitting there just lacing into someone about something that they're doing wrong, and then you realize that it's really just about you and you're projecting all of these insecurities onto the other person.
Wait a minute. That's what you say I do all the time.
And this story captures that perfectly.
Oh, man. You going to rename this one?
The Cathedral. All right, welcome to the CodeX Cantina, where I am Una.
And I'm the Cathedral.
If you are new to the CodeX Cantina, we take a conversational approach to the literature that we read. If you are down for discussions like that, make sure you hit the subscribe button to join us.
And as always, we start off with publication information. And Cathedral was published in 1983, and we'll leave a link down in the description below where you can listen for free.
Now, this story kind of put good old Ray on the map, so to speak. I guess the term is dirty realism, and to quote the wiki, writers focused on sadness and loss in the everyday lives of ordinary people, often lower middle class or isolated and marginalized people. And, it's worth pointing out that Raymond Carver grew up post-depression, got addicted to alcohol, was in and out of treatments. That I think he's speaking very much to the people that are looking for something better but aren't exactly sure how. It's not that they're uneducated, it's just that they're not clear on what they need to do to step forward in life.
So this piece has definitely a lot of personal experience for him and an overall meaning designed with one purpose, right?
If that one purpose is heavy irony, then he achieved it. We are in an undesirable narrator. We do not like what our main character is choosing, and I think that is very difficult for some readers. Some readers, they're not sure how to interpret it. They think they hate it. They think they dislike the story, but what they're really having problems with sometimes is associating with characters in this story because we are put in a crap bag's head, basically.
Yeah, and he doesn't have any redemption, and that's probably one of the problems, right? At least I know for me is I wanted to see this positive turnaround like we have in other stories, and it didn't happen.
Right, like Ebenezer Scrooge, he's a terrible person as well, and we see that, and we see the way that he mistreats individuals. But what we're living for in that story is that redemption turnaround moment where we see the character change. And we do have an epiphany in this story, but we don't get the confirmation that it was a positive change in a sense.
I would also say it's more of a negative affirmation, right? Not a positive change that we want.
Well, I think it's up to the reader to interpret that, but he definitely uses a lot of foils through this in terms of foils for what a healthy relationship looks like, a negative relationship, what good communication looks like versus poor communication. He uses opposites in a very sparse manner that this story is just very interesting, but it definitely accomplishes what it set out to be. Now, people may not like what it set out to be, but it definitely accomplished that.
Well, let's get into the plot so they can follow along with all our madness here.
So the narrator's wife took a job in Seattle 10 years ago to begin reading to a blind man, and she became close with him and continued to send him tapes over the years even after she stopped working for him. Now, one day he comes to visit, and the narrator is incredibly prejudiced against blind people. He expects them to be slow, not really sure how they can smoke, and expects them to wear dark sunglasses all the time.
It's like the worst stereotype ever.
Well, he is rather ignorant, and they try to catch up, and the wife gets a little snippy with him, and they smoke a doobie.
It seems like comes out of nowhere, right? I thought that was kind of funny.
Well, I think this kind of sets up the expectations of what readers may associate with this, but the man starts to realize that this blind man and him may be different, and he may have different expectations than what this blind man truly is. After the wife falls asleep, they keep watching TV, and that's when cathedrals come on. And the blind man asks him to kind of communicate what do cathedrals look like, and he gives these really typical, really broad, vague statements that don't describe anything, particularly if you were blind. They would not describe a cathedral at all. And then it leads to ultimately him, the blind man, getting a piece of paper and pen, and basically the narrator draws a cathedral while the blind man traces and says, yes, keep going. And there's a sense of weightlessness here for the narrator at the end, and that's when he sees the cathedral in his mind, not visually.
It almost feels happy, but you wanted just a little bit more, right? At least I did.
So let's start off with, we're in a dude's head we don't like, right?
Yep. No, you're not supposed to like, I don't think.
No, well, I mean, he was constantly snipping at his wife. He dismisses her poems that were special to her. He didn't even want, like, her good blind friend to come stay with him because he's blind. And I mean, he literally has no friends, right? When someone has no friends, usually that's in literature, that's meant to indicate, like, hey, there might be something wrong with this character.
Yeah, why wouldn't you have any friends? That's kind of harsh, right?
Well, in literature, right? So,
okay.
So he thinks a blind man should behave and act a certain way, right? Like, a beard. This blind man has a beard. This is completely ridiculous, right? Like, it's the most inane and insane expectations that he's putting on the visitor.
I thought that was really funny because the whole time I'm thinking, well, why would a blind man know how to shave? How would a blind man shave? Of course he's going to have a beard. That's what I thought the whole time. Like, this guy's an idiot.
Oh, gosh. Well, okay, so the blind man, so if he's ignorant, he's not listening, he's emotionally distant or short on what his emotional range is, the blind man's his foil, right? He has this compassion, he has this love and loss that he's had in his life, and this connection with his wife that our narrator doesn't even have the connection with. He comes along to kind of be the polar opposite of what our narrator is, right?
Yes, he can see without seeing.
But what's interesting to me is, like, some of the narration of the story in terms of, like, he got out of the car, she went over to the other side of the car, she helped him out of the car, she closed the door, like, it's so sparse and, like, interesting what they chose. And I started to kind of think, like, is this story, like, is the narrator have a diminished capacity to kind of explain what's happening?
Okay,
or
I didn't go there, but okay, I like it.
Or is the narrator specifically talking to us like we're blind? Is he telling us this story? You know, he's the one that's supposed to be able to see, but he can't detect these cathedrals. And the way that he's describing these things, like almost moment by moment, scene by scene, I feel like he is acting like he's teaching us, not teaching is the wrong word. He's relating to us as if we're blind because he can't really see. So that's why things are described that way, I kind of thought like.
So he's communicating it in those very imperceptive ways of, all right, 2 steps right. No, 2 short steps right. And it's all choppy little, almost like he was communicating with a child. Yeah, I like that.
Well, and you'll notice that, you know, we talked about the blind man, he lost his wife. And so the natural response is, I'm sorry, that's horrible, things like that. But our narrator says things like, man, he wouldn't even be able to tell if she was wearing mismatched socks. Like of all of the ways to describe conflicts in a relationship, mismatched socks ain't where you're supposed to start, right?
He's very inept in how to deal with relationships, that's for sure. Now, obviously, that's all by design.
Right. It's leading to this idea that the narrator has a diminished ability to connect with other people. He is stuck in his shell, in a sense.
Blind to see how he is unable to relate with people or how people even perceive him.
So this leads to the cathedral scene, right? And cathedrals, when I think of cathedrals, these are, I mean, they're places of worship, but they're supposed to be places of change, places where you can become a better person, places of miracles even in some people's eyes, right? And what does our person who has a diminished ability to connect and relate with the outside world see with cathedrals?
That they're all the same.
Right. The differences.
There's no distinction, right?
The differences in the Portuguese cathedral compared with the French and Italian were not that great, but they were there, mostly the interior stuff. And I think this was kind of the main point of the story, was that mostly the interior stuff. This man, the narrator, can't connect with others and really get to know what the inside is of others. Do you know what the Hebrew word is for knowledge, Crypto?
I'm a little rusty on my Hebrew, so I'm going to have to say no.
So to know is yada, okay? And there's
yada?
like yada, but yada. Well, I can't.
Cool.
I don't have the perfect accent. Don't use me as an example. But the reason why I know this is particularly when it comes to translating at least the parts of the Bible that were written in in Hebrew and had to be translated into English. How do you translate yada? Because not only does knowledge, to know, mean intellectual, that's where we stop, but yada goes beyond that. It means to actually have loyalty, to actually understand and almost even empathize with another person. So
I kind of get it now. Okay.
So here's our narrator who might know what a cathedral is. Like he can kind of see it, but he doesn't actually have knowledge. He doesn't have yada of the cathedral. He can't see the interior. And you'll notice there's this quote in the story, "Put some people in there now. What's a cathedral without people?" So again, this is talking about in order for a cathedral to be real, you have to have that personality. You have to have the people in it, right? And that's what our narrator fails to see is the personality even in people. He can't see that. He's so reliant on his eyes and expecting that to be the most important thing in terms of matching socks with your relationship, right? That he's failing to see the internal characteristics of what makes cathedrals different, what makes people different. That's what his big flaw is in this story.
I got two things. I just realized that yada, yada, yada is I know, or I get you, I get you, I get you, I understand you, I understand you, I understand you.
Offensive. Yeah. Don't do it.
I get that now. And also, I feel like cathedral is the perfect symbol for this story because cathedrals are big, beautiful, unique, glamorous structures that are usually very, very staple places in a community that are used as like signature points in a town, or people always know, oh, that's such and such. They know how to describe it. And for a guy not to get that really says something about this individual. And I love that that is the centerpiece of this story.
Now compare this. We talked about foils. We got to go to the foils of the cathedral. The audio tapes. What do you think the point of the audio tapes were?
Yeah, I was kind of confused on the audio tapes. Obviously, they're the main means of communication for the woman and the blind man, but I feel like that there had to be something deeper meaning, resonating of why the husband, the narrator, couldn't communicate when he has all the advantages over the blind man.
Well, think about that. Did the wife and the blind man have a great relationship?
Yes.
And what did they use to communicate?
Just their voices.
Which is they're conveying the inside, the interior, how they're feeling, what's going on. They're not focusing on the surface visualization of things. Now
the socks.
on the socks of all dang things. Now that is a direct foil to the narrator's relationship with the wife, which is very surface level. They don't ever talk about anything deep. They just kind of snap at each other and that sort of thing. So what we're seeing is that to really have knowledge of another person, it's not that you have to visually see them. It's that you have to emotionally and internally connect with them, which can be done with audio tapes because it takes away the distractions of visuals in a sense too.
Yeah, I could see that. I also wonder if the blind man was able to become a better communicator because he was blind. Had he been able to see at some point in his life, we don't know. So does that allow him to evolve into this better communicator?
Well, you have the idea that you lose one sense, that your other senses make up for it. I've heard that before. But I would say, at least in the consciousness of this story, we have the quote from the wife saying, "Robert, it's just so good to see you." Where again, I think he's using that irony of seeing almost as kind of like an ironical sense here, where she actually does connect with this person, and she's using it in a very interesting way in the story.
Do you think that the husband is lashing out of jealousy, even though it's never exactly portrayed that way? You could kind of feel that it is jealousy.
I just think that he's just a turtle that is just stuck in his shell is really how I view this narrator. And I think in the beginning, we even saw a little bit of foreshadowing that he'd come out of his shell. If you remember, the wife all she was is just reading, as a job to this blind man. No big deal, right? And then her big epiphany is, if you remember, he traced her face, right? So the blind man tracing is the first time that we see a real epiphany, I think, from the wife in this story. And I thought that kind of foreshadowed our turtle here at the end, where he's unable to connect with anything except socks. And it's only once he gets the pencil and paper that he starts to trace along with the blind man in the same way that he traced his wife's face, that he closes his eyes. And that's when we have this moment of weightlessness and true sight, where he's not distracted by his vision, but then finally gets to understand, what does it truly mean to connect? What does it truly mean to see and come out of your shell? I thought it was very well written. It was dirty and clean and very sparse, but it was a very interesting way I thought Carver approached this epiphany at the end.
So we only gain clarity when we're able to put aside what we rely on most.
Right. Well, if we put aside our surface distractions or these surface relationships and try to dive a bit deeper into our connections with people, get rid of the distractions, and that's when I think the first time, if I recall correctly, when the narrator and this man actually touch, like physically connect with each other too, that we have to be open to coming out of our shells and be vulnerable in a sense too, to truly relate with others.
Yeah. It was kind of cool how the blind man is the one that's able to do it for both of these people. It'd be really neat to see him be able to help them repair their own relationship also, because he seems to be a master at helping people this.
Well, I think that's kind of maybe the subjective interpretation that you take away at the end. Is this narrator going to be a better person now that he's finally coming out of his shell and willing to connect with others? I'd like to think that he has a chance at kind of repairing his relationship with his wife, but I'm kind of the optimist when it comes to these situations.
Yeah, I think I'm the pessimist, or maybe a realist. I don't know what you want to call me, but this guy's probably too set in his ways, and he could be probably good for like a week, but then he'd fall right back into being just meh.
You would totally rip to shreds any girl on a first date if her socks were mismatching. That is the type of person that you are, Crypto.
You don't even know me. I wear mismatched socks like every day. I just grab two. I grab two different dress socks every day.
Guys,
I love wearing mismatched socks.
Guys, we'll leave a playlist down for more Carver-related talks. This is definitely an interesting author with his dirty realism. And if you share this or
dirty socks,
if you share this video or comment down below, we'd certainly appreciate it, guys. Crypto, let's move into our subjective ratings. What are you going to give this one? I'm
going to give it a pair of dirty socks.
Okay.
No, I'm not giving it a 2. No, I'll give this a solid 6.5. I think this is a great use in a classroom for irony. But it is, I feel like, even though we got pretty deep, and I think there's some more stuff there, if we delve into the history of why this piece was written, you can coax a little bit more out of the story, but it is irony. Use it for that, I think, in the classroom, and you're going to get a lot out of this story. 6.5.
See, for me, I'm going to give it the 2 ratings, where I just have how I feel personally, which is subjective and completely irrelevant for others, but just to relate how I feel. And then there's also kind of the analytical of, how could you use this as a tool to teach, to learn, to understand more? I think as a tool, I think I rate this a little bit higher, like maybe like an 8.5 or a 9, where to your point, I think it's a great tool for irony. And I think it's a great point for talking about vulnerability, about ourselves. What does it mean to actually connect and have knowledge of others in a sense, right? Personally, this one just didn't really connect with me all that much. I'm not saying it's objectively bad, just subjectively didn't really get a lot out of it. So maybe on a personal scale, I'm kind of like maybe like a 6 out of 10. So average those 2 out, I'm like a 7, 7.5, somewhere around there. That would be my overall rating for this story.
So you're the narrator, and I'm the blind man. The blind leading the blind?
Something like that. Well, guys, if you enjoyed the talk today, we post episodes at least Monday and Thursday of every week, with a bonus one on Thursdays. If that sounds like something you'd like to join us with and have some fun in this literature discussion, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to join us. Una out.
Peace.